What are carbohydrates? Carbohydrates are organic molecules because they contain carbon. Carbon is the backbone of carbohydrates, and then they have hydrogen and oxygen atoms attached. They are formed by plants via photosynthesis. Photosynthesis requires energy from the sun, and then the energy from the sun combines with carbon dioxide in the air and water in the soil to create simple sugars. And then this energy is stored in plants as starch. So they are carbohydrates linked together. Now, carbohydrates can be classified as simple sugars or complex carbohydrates. The arrangement and the number of carbon molecules tells us the type of simple sugar. Simple carbohydrates and simple sugars are the same thing. Monosaccharides and disaccharides are one or two sugars linked together. And the more complex carbohydrates are known as oligosaccharides and polysaccharides. Glucose is the most abundant of the carbohydrates. It supplies energy to our cells. Monosaccharides are single sugars. So the single sugars will join with other sugars to create disaccharides. So again, glucose is the most abundant. Fructose you can find in fruits and vegetables and honey. Galactose will be found in milk or dairy products. Now, disaccharides, again, are two sugars linked together. Okay, so sucrose is coming from sugar beets and sugar cane. You could think of sucrose as like table sugar. So for example, if you were at a coffee shop and wanted to add sugar to your tea or your coffee, you'd be using sucrose. Or if you decided you wanted to bake some cookies and went to the store to get sugar, you would be buying sucrose. Now, maltose we don't see in food products really, because it's actually more a breakdown product from digestion. And then lactose is going to be glucose and galactose linked together. Now, somebody who is a lactose intolerant means they do not have the enzyme to break down lactose, or they just have a very small amount of it. So the complex carbohydrates are long chains of sugars or carbohydrates linked together. For example, starches and fibers. So oligosaccharides are short chains. They are 3 to 10 sugars linked together. For example, high fructose corn syrup, and maltodextrin. Now the polysaccharides will be longer. They can be straight or they can be branched, and they will be 10 or more sugars in length. Good examples are starch and glycogen. So like I mentioned before, starch is the plant's storage form of energy, whereas glycogen is the human's storage form of energy. The molecular structure will determine its water solubility, how easily it's digested, and how it responds to heat. So food sources of complex carbohydrates would be grains, legumes, and potatoes. Other polysaccharides or complex carbohydrates are dietary fiber. So dietary fiber will be found in plant cell walls and inside plant cells. Dietary fiber is non-digestible, meaning it does not have caloric value. It does not supply the body with any energy. It will be coming from plant sources. And we have two different types of fiber, soluble and insoluble. So soluble fiber dissolves in water, and it's going to come from foods like oats, barley, legumes, and some fruits and vegetables. Insoluble does not dissolve in water, and it will come from whole grains, nuts, seeds, and some vegetables. Now, don't worry about which type you're consuming because both of them are beneficial. Both of them have been shown to help somebody reduce their cholesterol, maintain a regular digestive system, regulate their blood glucose, and feel satisfied. Leads to satiety after a meal. Functional fiber, also non-digestible, you might see that on food labels sometimes. It does have beneficial physiological effects. Keep in mind that bacteria in the colon will ferment fiber, which can sometimes lead to gas for people. So this is something to keep in mind when working with athletes because we want to encourage athletes to consume fiber because of all the benefits someone can experience from them. But we don't want to push the fiber so much that it leads to uncomfortable gas or maybe increasing their stool mass too much, leading to some complications during an event. So we want to be careful about that. And as much as I really want to encourage people to consume a good amount of fiber, we want to gradually increase their fiber intake. Now, artificial sweeteners can be classified as non-nutritive or nutritive. So they're non-nutritive, meaning they provide sweetness without any calories. Now, occasionally athletes might be attracted to something that can help them to have that sweet taste without a lot of calories because athletes might be worried about weight control. Generally, artificial sweeteners will be much sweeter than regular sucrose. Okay, so like for example, it's typically about 100 times sweeter than regular sugar. Artificial sweeteners must have FDA approval before entering the food supply. The FDA approves and regulates the safety limit, and it sets the ADI. ADI is acceptable daily intake. So this is the amount that can be consumed per kilogram without any risk. And this is generally set very conservatively. So again, the FDA does approve and regulate the safety limit and sets the acceptable daily intake. Many of our artificial sweeteners do have GRAS status, meaning they are generally recognized as safe. Many of them have been in our food supply for so long that they were granted GRAS status. You're most likely familiar with some of these different artificial sweeteners that are out there. There's quite a variety of them now. Aspartame is a very popular one. If you drink Diet Coke or other diet beverages, that is aspartame. It is derived from an amino acid. Sucralose is Splenda, the little yellow packet. It is a chemically altered form of sucrose. Now, saccharin is sweet and low. It has been around since the 1960s. Tagatose is interesting. It does provide 1.5 calories per gram, and only about 15 to 20% of it is absorbed in the small intestine. Some of these artificial sweeteners can be very controversial. However, long-term research has very inconsistent results. Another thing to look out for are sugar alcohols or polyols. So these will be found naturally in some fruits and vegetables and produced for commercial use. Oftentimes you will come across them in things like gum or mints. I'm also noticing them quite often in certain protein bars or sport bars, whatever they might be. And typically you can identify a sugar alcohol because it ends in OL, sorbitol, mannitol. You may find that companies that use sugar alcohols will market them as low impact carbohydrates. Sorbitol and mannitol are incompletely absorbed. So they have fewer calories per gram than sucrose or sucrose or fructose, about half to a third fewer calories. So the sugar alcohols have incomplete absorption, meaning they do not have any direct metabolism that provides the usual 4 calories per gram. Okay, so as you already know, typically a carbohydrate provides 4 calories per gram. Depending on the type, the sugar alcohols might provide 1.5 to 3 calories per gram. So you can come across them in the nutrition facts panel and on the ingredient list. Like I said, they're often in sugar-free gum. However, just because something has a sugar alcohol in it does not necessarily mean that it is a low calorie food. And we also need to be very careful with this, with the sugar alcohols with our athletes, because oftentimes the sugar alcohols can have a laxative effect for somebody or just lead to overall GI upset, especially if they are consuming a large amount of the sugar alcohols.